Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something that might genuinely make you stop and think. Can a strong belief in God actually lead to, well, lower self-confidence? Sounds like a contradiction, right? I mean, for so many, faith is that rock. But the sources we've looked at suggest understanding this dynamic, how it works, could really reshape how you approach your faith and, your personal agency in life. We've got some fascinating material here, research and insights. And our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack those subtle connections between faith and personal power. We want to see what the studies show, and crucially, how you can navigate this balance effectively.
It's a really interesting area, and you're right, the material does challenge some common assumptions. We'll be pulling out the key ideas from texts that look at the psychology of belief. The goal is to give you a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of this whole relationship.
Okay, so let's unpack that core idea. For countless people, faith is just this huge source of comfort, especially when things get tough. It gives hope, direction, strength. That's incredibly valuable, no question.
Absolutely. But the question the sources raise is this. What happens when that reliance on, let's say, divine help starts to overshadow? Or maybe even unintentionally replaces our own trust in our ability to act, to make decisions, to lead our own lives?
Yeah, the sources point to this really subtle but critical shift. It's like instead of thinking, okay, God's with me, so I'm going to push forward, it can sometimes drift into something more like, well, I'll just wait. God will handle everything.
Yeah.
And the research suggests that's where confidence can start to dip. It's a point that might really hit home if you've ever found yourself sort of stuck, just waiting for something outside yourself to change things. And this isn't just, a feeling people have. There's actual research here.
Exactly. If we look at the academic side, two studies really jump out from the material. First, going back a bit, Allport and Ross in 1967, psychologists, they were exploring how different religious outlooks affect personality, and they identified two main types. Intrinsic faith, where belief is really deeply personal, integrated into who you are, and then extrinsic faith, where religion is used more for, say, comfort or social connection, maybe other external benefits.
And the difference between those two, what did they find?
Well, this is the interesting part. Allport and Ross found that people showing more extrinsic faith often had lower self-esteem and also a weaker sense of personal responsibility. It kind of suggests that if faith is more of an external tool, it might not build up that internal strength, that sense of control.
That's a really key distinction.
Yeah.
And you mentioned another study, more recent.
Yes, the sources also highlight a 2002 study, Sika and colleagues. They look specifically at how belief in divine control affects something called self-efficacy.
Which is basically your belief in your own ability to get things done, right?
Yeah, actually, your confidence in handling specific situations. And the results were pretty clear. People who strongly believe God controls everything, well, they tended to be less confident in their own efforts.
Right.
They were less likely to, take the reins, more likely to wait.
So putting those together, Allport and Ross, Sika, it paints a picture, doesn't it? It shows there's this research-backed dynamic we need to be aware of. These studies give us a solid foundation for understanding why this perceived conflict might happen.
Precisely. Which brings us to the big question, why? Why does this sometimes happen? The sources suggest that a very extreme reliance, maybe call it overdependence, on the divine can shift our mindset. It can shift us away from action towards surrender, away from active decision-making, towards waiting. And, maybe most importantly, away from trusting ourselves, towards placing all hope externally.
That makes intuitive sense, actually. If you consistently hand over all the agency,
Yeah.
if you're not exercising that decision muscle, what happens? Like any muscle, right? If you don't use it, it weakens. When we stop acting, maybe we stop growing in that area. And if we keep pushing aside our own judgment or our initiative, confidence could slowly just fade away.
And the implication, as these texts really emphasize, isn't just theoretical. It means we might find ourselves feeling, lost, indecisive, maybe even passive when a situation really calls for us to step up, be bold, take charge. Again, it's not about criticizing faith itself, not at all. It's about looking at a specific mindset that can sometimes develop within faith.
Right. But here's the important part. The sources don't just diagnose a potential issue, they offer ways forward. This deep dive isn't about knocking faith. It's about figuring out how to make it work with your personal power, not against it. The texts really stress that true spiritual growth isn't about ditching responsibility.
Exactly. It's about integrating them, weaving them together. It's about combining faith with effort, hope with action, prayer with purpose. It frames faith as something active, something engaged, not passive.
And I found some of the practical thoughts from the sources really powerful. really actionable. Like instead of just waiting around for signs from above, the idea is become the sign, embody the change. Or instead of only asking for strength, the insight is to actively build it. Step into the challenge, trusting you're supported. It puts a great spin on that old saying, God helps those who help themselves. It's about owning your part of the equation.
Yes, absolutely. And the material also points to the value of role models, surrounding yourself with people you see living this balance, people with deep faith and real courage, real initiative. Seeing it lived out can be incredibly helpful. And for anyone feeling this tension strongly, the sources even mention things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, how therapeutic approaches can help rewire those thought patterns that might be separating faith and personal power in your mind.
So let's circle back then to that initial, maybe provocative question. Can strong faith lower self-confidence?
Well, based on our deep dive into these sources, the answer seems to be nuanced. Like most deep truths, right? It's a yes, potentially, if that faith leads you to replace your own self-belief, to push away all your agency.
Okay.
But it's a strong no if that faith actually empowers you, if it fuels you to move forward with courage, reminding you that you're supported as you do your part.
Hmm. True faith doesn't make us weak. That's a key takeaway here. It reminds us we're not alone while we do the work we need to do.
Exactly.
Which leaves us with a really powerful thought, something for you to take away and reflect on. Let's try not to use faith as a way to step back from action or from responsibility or from realizing our own potential. Instead, let's use it to give deeper meaning, real courage, and a strong sense of purpose to every action we take. Stay rooted in your beliefs and absolutely rise in your confidence.